Hello Grandmasters, Mike from the WCA. How is everyone doing? I have a little video from the week 2 update, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock Grandmasters. Anyway, you're looking here at a position that is the end of the center fork trick as you know it. This is the usual continuation when somebody allows the center fork trick. Now, how did we get here? Let's go to a typical 4 knights position. By now, you must be tired of me talking to you about this, but it's so important because it keeps coming up over and over again in class and in the tournaments that I go to see. Now, after bishop c5 for black, white now gets to play the center fork trick. So you take on e5. When the knight takes, or if the knight takes, you fork the 2 pieces. They'll move one of them. This is like the main line that black will play. And then from this position, they get their piece back, and we've already discussed why this is okay for white. It doesn't win by any means, but you know, white gets to keep this pawn in the middle, and they knocked out black's center pawn. And because you have a little more central control and some space, that's a pretty good thing. Okay, now, what happens over time is when people realize they've walked into the center fork trick, for example, after here. So it's white's turn. White can play their center fork trick. Now black knows he's going to get a piece for a pawn, and then he's going to have to give the piece back for a pawn. So it's just this fancy swap. They're going to trade off, right? So what a lot of players try to do is they figure, okay, I have to give a piece for a pawn anyway, so why don't I do this? Why don't I give up my piece here, which looks even better because now I'm going to stop white from castling. So white naturally takes the bishop, and now I'll take the piece because after d4, there's no fork anymore. I've already got my piece back, the pawn back. We're both happy. We've made the same swap, but maybe this is better for black because look what I did to the white king. Can you see him dancing around down here? He's been opened up a little bit. However, this is not as great as it looks for black. And let me explain why. I'm going to show you a game that was played in the Czech Republic in 2001. 2 masters, but this exact position could easily happen in one of your games. So pay very close attention to how these players handled this position, especially white. He did a really, really good job. Okay. So black's knight is hanging. It's being attacked. So the most natural thing to do with the knight is to give a check. And this is what happened in the game. He came here to g4, checked the king, and now it's not an easy decision for the white king. Like, where do you go? And it turns out the most effective move for white is to actually hide the king on the g1 square. And that looks kind of weird. It looks like, you know, white was here, he decided to castle, and the rook just said, you know what, I don't feel like moving. And he just hangs out in the corner. So that's the position you have. And that is really uncomfortable for this rook right now. However, in the future, that rook is going to get into the game by you doing the following. You'll move this pawn to h3, which will kick this knight out. You can put your king on the h2 square and then slide your rook over to get into the game. That seems like a pretty good plan. So let me show you what happened from this position, and we'll see if these ideas kind of come to life. Now, it might not be a bad idea for you birds to pause your video right here and just kind of get a look at this. If you're really doing your homework, you can set up a chessboard and go through this move by move with me and pause the video whenever you want. This way you get a chance to, you know, pretend you're playing the game. Okay, so here's what happened. Black to play decided to give this bishop a kick up on here on b5. And now what to do with it? Well, why not gain a tempo? So white plays bishop to e2, and you'll see the queen and bishop make a battery, and that attacks this knight twice. And black could easily go back, but I like black's move a lot. Black says, you know what? I don't want to run away. I'm going to play pawn to d6, which opens up my light squared bishop. And I would really like for you to take this, because if you take my bishop, I get to develop my bishop with a tempo. And when that happens, you move your queen, and guess what? I castle. I have all of my pieces out. and I'm doing pretty well with my development. So if you were here and you were playing the white pieces, if we go back to that position, after d6, ask yourself, does this trade help me or does it help black? And I hope you've realized that it really doesn't help white's position. So what does? Pause your video. See if you can find a move here for white that fits into everything that we're talking about. Okay, I hope you found h3. It's a really, really cool move. It's not designed to win the knight. I mean, you can't expect black to leave the knight there and just give you a free pizza. That's not going to happen. So in the game, the only really good square the knight can go to is h6. And when you go back, you realize that these two pawns in the middle are taking away so many squares from the black pieces that there really isn't any other place for this knight to go. So h3, very good move. It's going to give our king a square. It's going to chase the black knight to a bad square, and white's position is going to begin to unwind. So think of him being all tied up, and the word unwind is like you're unwinding a big ball of string. You're unwrapping it. So the knight goes to h6, and let's put a couple of highlights on the board for you. All right, first of all, I'm going to put three little sections or pieces on the board at once. The two black knights, they're highlighted for a reason, the two pawns in the middle, and this dark squared bishop down here. And this is really going to help you with your understanding of chess, especially the middle game, not just the center fork trick. I mean, the center fork trick is just an idea in chess, but once the middle game starts, the middle game is so rich with ideas that you can't go into a middle game with just one idea in your mind. You have to be flexible, and you have to really, really pay attention to trades. Okay, so let me play a move here in the game here, which was bishop to g5. And after bishop g5, I want you to pay attention to the following. Remember back here when I showed you this pawn move moving to h3 to attack something here. Do you notice that now, since there's a black knight on h6, you really can't get rid of, whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Go back, mister. You can't get rid of this bishop so easily. It's pinning the knight, so it's not really helping you in terms of getting rid of this piece. Okay, so let's go back here again. You see the three highlights. All right, let's do the knights first. They're not really placed well. This is the normal square for a black knight in a king pawn opening, but you'll notice here it doesn't have any forward squares. You can't take the pawn on e4, you lose a piece. Any square on this line is not good. You can go backwards. Check out the guy on h6. Probably not a great piece right now. It can only go backwards. I hope you were not intending on taking this bishop, taking this knight, and I'll talk about this in a moment. I mean, it wouldn't be a terrible move, but you'll see in a moment why you probably shouldn't do that in a game. All right, now let's put another highlight on. Remember these two guys? What do you think this is worth? There's two pawns side by side in the middle of the chessboard, 4 ranks up. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you see that black's pawns are only on the 3rd rank. So white has a ton of space and two really strong pawns. Now, they were kind of inconvenienced. White, I mean, look at the white king. So granted, that king is not on his favorite square, let's say. He's going to have to move again to get the rook out, but white was kind of paid for that. He was given something for that inconvenience, and it's two black knights that are not so great, two center pawns that are controlling a lot of squares. And don't forget that white has two bishops. Two bishops can be very, very powerful if this game ever decides to open up, especially this bishop. I want you to pay close attention to this guy. Did the white king get pushed to a funny square? Your answer should be yes, he did. What did black have to give up to get that king to this funny spot? He had to give up his dark squared bishop. And in this game, white has a dark squared bishop, which means as the middle game starts to take place, we're going to see if white is able to open up the black squares and take advantage of the fact that black has two bad knights and white potentially has a really powerful dark squared bishop. I hope this stuff makes sense to you. Okay, white to play, bishop g5. Excellent move. No way he's given up this dark squared bishop. Black decides that right away he needs to get his knight into the game and goes backwards. You can't blame him really, because the knight really has no future there, and he's afraid of this knight getting kicked and this pin not being able to get broken, so he spends the time to go backwards. And here in this position, I like white's move a lot. White decided to play pawn to e5, which is going to really stir up complications. Think of a pawn move like this creating a lot of excitement in the middle of the board. It attacks a knight, it attacks a pawn. There's the possibility of pawns disappearing in the center. Why would white want to do that? Well, a couple of reasons. They have two of these pointy guys, two bishops. Do bishops enjoy open games or closed games? You know that answer. The other reason why white is interested in opening the game is, look at the two kings. The black king is sitting up here on e8. He's very, very uncomfortable there. As soon as this knight here, not that guy, sorry, mister. As soon as this knight decided to go back, it created a situation where black's going to have to spend another move before he can castle. So what white does is white just says, hey, let me open the game while your king is in the middle. And it's kind of a tough situation because you can't move this knight out of the way. You'll lose your queen. So he takes. White takes back. And when white takes back, you see these two highlights that I made here. You're going to see why in a minute that black tries to take advantage of this. Some people who have seen this game said white should maybe trade the queens to get rid of the pressure, which looks like a pretty good idea. But if you trade the queens, the rook is going to take back. And you have to be careful where you move this knight, obviously, because that's checkmate. Because there's a bishop on g5. That's like the end of the famous Paul Morphy game, same pattern. So if you put your knight on d5, then white's getting ready to hop in on these weak, dark squares. You see what I was talking about before? It's because I'm a genius. Boy, I knew that bishop would come to life. Wow, I'm getting better every day. Okay, let me show you what happened in the game. Black said, you know what? I don't want to trade the queens and walk into that line. I see a little trick. So he gives a check. It's not such a big deal for white because white jumps his king to the square he wants to go anyway. That frees his rook. But black thought that he could play this move, queen c5, and that, as I pointed out before, not here, I'm sorry, here, you see these two pieces up on this part of the board? After black puts his queen on c5, this pawn is pinned, so that if you take the knight on f6, the queen can take the bishop. And it turns out that would have been really good for white to do anyway, but what he did was just as good. Anyway, some of you might notice this as well, back here after queen to b6. So this is the game continuation. King goes to h2, and some people go like, why can't we just take a pawn down here? Well, you can. It attacks a knight here, but the complications really favor white. So they just took a piece from you. You need to take one as well, and then they just take on g7, and you have a real problem here. Do you see why you can't take that pawn back? Same idea. Checkmate. Yeah, not good. Now, whoa, what is that? Looks like another green blob. This giant swamp just showed up on the board. What I did is I highlighted the 4 central squares and some squares that surround it, especially down on white's side. You see all those squares? This is a 4x3. So that's 12 open boxes, if my math is correct. The board is wide open. Look at those bishops. Look at that king. Not a good idea to play this way. You can't go pawn hunting with black if your king is in the middle of the board. So let me show you what the guy did. He played queen to c5, again trying to take advantage of this pin, and white could take the knight, give up the bishop for the knight, and then swing the rook over and get to that king. But I like his move. He just said, you know what? I'm going to keep my dark square bishop on the board and protect my pawn. cover my king on this diagonal, and let me just see what you want to do. Now this knight is hanging. So the knight jumps to the middle, offering a trade, and white very calmly says no. Knight e4, hitting the queen, and more importantly, getting ready to occupy one of those weak dark squares we talked about. So I hope this is starting to make sense for you. When I saw this game the first time, I said, wow, what a great example of how to play this position. All right, black to play, the queen is hanging, queen to b6. And once the queen runs away, the bishop is now being attacked by the knight, and he very calmly drops it back to g3, keeping the bishop on the board, hoping to open up those dark squares even more. Black played knight g to e7, developing, getting ready to castle, and white keeps disrupting black's plan. White has the initiative here, and that's a word we've used so much at the WCA. Think of the initiative as a position where every move that you play pretty much tells your opponent, you better solve the problem I'm giving you, because anything else you do is going to be a big, big problem for you. So what does black want to do here? Black wants to castle, or at least play some developing move. What black doesn't want to do is move the same piece twice. So watch how white keeps the initiative. Pawn c4, attacking a minor piece. Now these are two masters. You can't just give away minor pieces and castle in this position. So he plays knight e3, attacking the queen, and rather than moving the queen first, an in-between move, a really nice check, which gives the king the square f8. Going back, if you want to put your king on this line and come into some discovered check at some point, I don't think that's going to work out so well for you. So it's pretty clear that the white is forcing the black king to f8. Now white moves the queen, putting pressure on the knight. And after queen d3, what else does it do? Do you see the highlights at the bottom? I hope you do. Those two rooks are connected. If you play a move like bishop to d7, which looks natural to me, getting that bishop in the game, you could run into bishop f2, and the knight is pinned. You guys see that? Those dark squares are going to collapse. So after queen to d3, white played the knight to f5, coming after the bishop, rook h to f1, which makes it a little unpleasant to take this bishop because there's a rook coming up here with check, which can be a real problem. So he supports the knight and at the same time opens the g7 square. The reason? He needs to get his king in the game so that the rook can swing over. But again, look at these dark squares here. Let me pop the lights on these guys. You see these? Look at that cool little pattern. Looks like a T to me. Those dark squares are so weak. Who's the only one with a dark squared bishop? White. Okay, so bishop f4. I really like the way this guy played. He loved this dark squared bishop, so he moves it up, and of course he's getting ready to occupy these dark squares, and then simply pawn h5. That will open a square for the rook this way if you need it, prevents the bishop from coming in someday. If you had played another developing move like this, then white can actually afford to push pawns near his king, chase the knight away, and then a move like bishop to e3, which attacks the queen. And I'll just show you, it's a double attack. Really cool move. You hit the queen, and at the same time, that rook is ready to take that pawn with check. Black is completely busted here. So after h5, white jumps the bishop into g5, occupying those dark squares. Out comes the light squared bishop, in comes the dark squared bishop. Oh man, if I'm playing black in this position, I'm not having fun. So if you run this game on a computer, you might find that, you know, maybe white could have done a couple of things better. I'm not really sure what, but I really, really like the way that he played with this dark squared bishop. Rook got out of the way, and this move bringing the last piece into the game, protecting the pawn again and possibly getting ready to push it to attack the queen. Rook to b8, protecting this pawn so that the queen could move, the knight wouldn't take it for free, and then rook f to d1. And I think here a cool idea would have been to just take this knight up here, and when you take back, Look at this really nice sacrifice, giving up a rook for a minor piece, because if you take back, you can see these two pieces, the king and the rook. Can you find a double attack? Look at that. Ouch. Really nice. So anyway, so rook f to d1, white is centralizing all the pieces and putting all this pressure. The knight jumps back to g7, just praying you'll take this knight to get rid of this dark square bishop. And of course, white just says, nope, I'm coming in even more on these dark squares. The knight went back to challenge the bishop. Bishop took the knight, finally trading, but there's a big reason why. When the king takes back, queen a3. Again, total domination of the dark squares. Between this rook and this diagonal, black is forced to play the move c5. And here, very important not to take the pawn with your queen. You do not want to trade queens here and let black play from this position. They're still worse, but they have a chance to survive this. After the move c5, you take with your knight, which threatens real nasty discovered checks, and you can leave this on the board and you'll see that it's over. All right, wonderful game. I hope you learned a lot about the middle game, how to play with your king on a funny square, and what to do when you see your opponent's pieces on funny squares. Also, what was the other theme? The dark squared bishop, how powerful it was because it didn't have someone on the other side to fight it. Okay, Grandmasters, we'll see you Sunday. No, we will not. It's Mother's Day. My goodness, my mother would be so mad at me if I forgot.